So I would say personally, without being a demographer or a statistician, it seems to me that we'd be looking at somewhere in the 2050s, and my gut instinct is at which point white British would become a minority.
They should be really worried about this, especially if they are white British, because when the white British do become a minority, the minority population, then minority rights will disappear, because historically that's what happens.
And now what happens to all of that rhetoric and all of those ideas when we are the minority and can't, defend ourselves? I mean, I know people can't defend themselves now, but when it actually can be used in a genuinely kind of threatening and hostile way to a minority.
The respected Pew Research Centre has forecast that the Muslim population of this country could rise to just under 20%. So let's say 17 or 18% in the next 25 years. So we could essentially treble from where it is now at 6.5%.
So, I mean, we're filming this on a Thursday. We've just heard from our producer that Zia Youssef has resigned from the Reform Party. Hello and welcome to Newspeak, the New Cultural Forum's look at the weekly news. I'm Amy Gallagher, filling in for Peter Whittle, and I'm joined by our regular commentators, Rafe Hadel-Manku, Senior Fellow of the New Cultural Forum and Royal Historian, and Philip Kisley, Senior Fellow of the New Cultural Forum and Cultural Historian. We've got quite a Islam-heavy show for today. We're going to be looking at burkas and Koran burning and Muslim majorities. But before we do, Philip, we've got some locals.
Yeah, we've got some locals events. The calendar for June is filling up very quickly. On the 7th, we've got drinks in Lincoln. On the 11th, we've got Newcastle, an evening introducing the SDP. And on the 11th, we've got an informal social in Cambridge. On the 12th, we've got North London with Charlie Downs, and on the 12th we've got a South London meetup as well. On the 21st there's a gallery visit in London. On the 24th there's a Dorset meetup. On the 25th there's a meetup in Beaconsfield with a guest speaker, Catherine McBride. On the 30th there's NCF Book Club, which is excellent. And on the 12th of July, there's Carlisle meetup, which is a talk and discussion. And on the 13th, there's a Birmingham meetup, which is the second birthday of the Birmingham group. And I'll be there to say hello. So please do come along if you want to join. Locals, email us at locals@newcultureforum.org.uk, and you will be very welcome indeed.
Great. Thank you, Philip. So to kick off the show, there's been a recent Telegraph article highlighting the research done by Professor Matthew Goodwin at University of Buckinghamshire, but also of GB News. I guess it's kind of showing what this research is showing, kind of things that we've talked about on the show a lot, about how the white British population of the UK are going to become a minority in years to come, and the rise of Islam. But I guess it's just clarifying those statistics a little bit. This was data obtained from the national data that's available. Can you talk us through it a bit?
Yes, so this is an important new study by the Centre for Heterodox Studies, which is an important institute set up in this country, modelled on one by America. As you say, it's based at the University of Buckingham, which is the only sort of private free speech university we have in this country, and Eric Kaufman and Matt Goodwin very involved with all of this. And it says, and it's received great traction in the media across various, from the Times to the Mail to the Telegraph and so forth. And it says that essentially by 2063, the white British population of this country will be a minority. It's basing that upon upon census results from 2021 and looking at various data to project how that would change and increase. And so essentially, it's currently approximately three quarters of the nation is white British, around 73%. They say that by 2075. It will be 44%, down to 33% by 2100, but actually will become a minority before then. Now, this ties in very well with what Professor David Coleman of the University of Oxford said in 2010. Professor David Coleman is the foremost expert on demography in this country, one of the world's great experts. And he forecast in 2010 that Britain would become minority white British by 2066. Now, personally, I take a bit of issue with this because, as we all know and suspect, ONS data severely underestimates what probably is the true population number of this country. We've, it's often said that utility companies and places like Thames Water and so forth have a much better gauge on what the population of this country really is, because they can see in real time usage and this sort of a thing. And they've, years ago had estimates saying that the population of this country was 70 million. Over a decade ago. We do know we don't do exit checks on people leaving the country for some ridiculous reasons. So we don't know the numbers of people who are leaving the country, but we confidently estimate that there are probably a few more million people in this country than the official data suggests. And because most of those will be illegal immigrants, in fact, all of them will be illegal immigrants, obviously there's a very high chance that they're not white at all. So by and also should be said that the 2010 estimate of 2066 being when white British become a minority of Professor Coleman, that was based on immigration figures which are half of what we're currently experiencing. So I would say personally, without being a demographer or a statistician, it seems to me that we'd be looking at somewhere in the 2050s, and my gut instinct is at which point white British would be become a minority. Also interesting, worthy to discuss, well, what type of population will we have in this country? So one of the interesting things about mass immigration that we've noted, and other demographers on this channel have addressed, is the fact that once ethnic minorities come to this country, with one exception, their birth rate falls down to almost equivalent to the British national average. So the British fertility rate for those born in the UK is currently 1.39. Whereas it's 1.54 for non-Muslims, so pretty much similar. But it's only the Muslim population that has a birth rate that is above replenishment, which needs to be above 2, is currently at 2.35. Now, according to the Centre for Heterodox Social Science that we were talking about, so Matt Goodwin's centre, we currently have 6.5% to 7% of this country is Muslim. They estimate that by 2050 that will increase to 11%, and by 2075 to 15%. Again, I personally think that's a bit of an underestimate, of an underprojection. The respected Pew Research Centre has forecast that the Muslim population of this country could rise to just under 20%. So let's say 17 or 18% in the next 25 years. So we could potentially treble from where it is now at 6.5%. So I think this raises huge questions, because too often when we discuss immigration in this country, we talk about the economic impact. How will it affect the economy, benefits, also the stresses on infrastructure, looking at schools, GP places, hospital appointments, all that sort of thing. But actually, it's the cultural impact that is arguably just as important, if not more important, than the economic and infrastructure impact. Because at what point does Britain stop being Britain? If it's 30% white British, is it still Britain? And what are the common links and themes and the common shared moments that we will have as a people? Traditionally, it would be great sporting events or royal events or, television programs, movies, the common culture we all share. I could easily identify. But when we are so disparate, when we are essentially retreating into ethno-nationalist silos with these increased segregated communities that live parallel lives, can we say that we are actually one cohesive society? And I think that's one of the great challenges. And we know, of course, from all the statistical evidence, economically and sociologically, that the more ethnic diversity you have, the weaker society becomes. It's not a strength. And of course, this data projects that we're going to continue to become increasingly not a united kingdom, but a united nation.
It's interesting, Rafe, because you use the term ethnic minorities there to describe people coming in. And we've heard nothing, the progressive left have pushed this idea of minorities and ethnic minorities for so long that it's kind of become a word for like non-white, hasn't it? But there's always this idea implicit that even if a minority is being treated well and they're not experiencing discrimination or they're not experiencing racism, it's difficult to be a minority because, that's the idea of representation, isn't it? The importance of seeing yourself in the world that you live in. And I think people are still getting their heads around that white people are the ethnic, or going to be, and in some places in the UK now are an ethnic minority. And will that same compassion and care for that minority extend to the white population?
This is, I think this is the key point, and this is what we absolutely have to think about. And I've been tweeting about this week. I mean, the response to this, to Matt's research, is really interesting, isn't it? Because on the one hand, people are absolutely shocked by it. And it's bizarre to me that you should be shocked by this. You should be shocked because it's an under-projection, I think. But on the other hand, the pro-immigration lobby, the identity politics lobby, the left are just, well, so what? So what? Oh, this is ridiculous. Most people are. They should be really worried about this, especially if they are white British, because when the white British do become a minority, the minority population, then minority rights will disappear, because historically that's what happens. And we are prepping, this society has been prepping for this for the last 30, 40, 50 years. It's been prepping through the grudge culture of identity politics. When I was reading the Telegraph piece about this, and I was looking at the stats, one phrase kept coming into my mind all the time, and that was any means necessary. We've seen this, pardon me, we've seen this phrase on the streets, haven't we, with the pro-Hamas marchers, the hate marchers on Saturday. We've seen, any means necessary. That is going to really hit home, and that's going to have a very different meaning. We will have a balkanized society, but white British people will be absolutely victimised. There's no question of that. We're already doing it. We're prepping the ground, as I say. Decolonisation, anti-capitalism, the patriarchy, all of these things. There's a sense it's prepping the legitimisation of violence towards a particular group that is seen to be evil, and that evil is manifest through what is essentially a Manichaean network of good versus evil. Good brown and black people, evil white man and offspring. I'm sorry, but that's where we are.
Now, we've been told our whole lives that wrinkle creams were the easiest way to look younger. Now, one doctor says that that's nothing but old news. According to Dr. John Lake, the world-renowned Beverly Hills beauty expert, most wrinkle fixes on the market are nothing but glorified moisturizers. They hardly make a dent on your appearance, and some can even be harmful to your skin, he says. Recently, Dr. Lake has focused his attention away from mainstream cosmetic practices. Why? Well, so he can pursue a revolutionary anti-aging breakthrough, one that some experts say could empty the wallets of the cosmetic industry. It's almost like Photoshop for your face. You may even be mad after seeing how easy it is to visibly erase your wrinkles from view, Lake told reporters. His personal clients have dubbed his new do-it-yourself technique the, quote, age rewinder method, because it can take years or even decades off your appearance in under 2 minutes. In light of this amazing breakthrough, Dr. Lake has released a step-by-step video to the public, free and uninterrupted, where he outlines exactly how to use this simple solution from home. If this helps even one person look younger or feel more confident, I'll be thrilled knowing I helped, Dr. Lake commented. The video has since gone viral. At first it was shared by users on Facebook, but since then it's racked up over 2.3 million views and counting. So far, the comments and feedback have been outstanding, with thousands of women reporting they look decades younger. One viewer even commented, "Best results of anything I've used. I can't believe how well this works. I'll never stop using this. I don't understand how it works, but the results are great. Thank you." So you can find out more about this yourself right now. Go to bhmd1.com/culture or click on the link in the description box below. That's bhmd1.com/culture. Now, there is one thing Dr. Lake asks from his viewers. If watching this video helps you look and feel younger than you have in years, then please do share it with your friends and your loved ones. Together we have the power to help as many women as possible reclaim a youthful look. Go watch the video at bhmd1.com/culture right now, or just click on the link in the description box below.
It is potentially terrifying because, as you say, up until the 90s, we had this kind of liberal idea of races. We were a post-racial society. Race didn't matter. And then because of kind of woke ideology, we went for kind of re-racialization of society, where we was told that whiteness is this kind of global evil, white fragility, white privilege, white people are inherently racist, all of this. But of course we were the majority, but this has been what our institutions have pushed for the last couple of decades.
Yeah.
And now what happens to all of that rhetoric and all of those ideas when we are the minority and can't, defend ourselves? I mean, I know people can't defend themselves now, but when actually it can be used in a genuinely kind of threatening and hostile way to a minority. If that minority is perceived as inherently racist or inherently evil, what happens then?
You need to ask the Jews, don't you?
Yeah.
This is precisely the case. And we can already see evidence of it now, for example, in jury trials, where we can see where ethnic minority members of jury trials, I think particularly those who are black, for example, will tend to find white people guilty at a far higher rate than they will the non-white population. And that, of course, is based clearly in biases and prejudices. And this is something you can test even, in America, it's very famously tested at the O.J. Simpson trial, for example, where it was overwhelming majority of black people thought he was guilty, thought he was innocent of the crime simply because he was black. So for a lot of ethnic minorities, at least at this stage in their development in the Western world, they view everything through the prism of race, whereas for a lot of white people, as you said, we were in a post-racial society where white people were actually judging people much more effectively on the merits of a case, for example. But you can just sort of see, therefore, that discrimination. And, as I've often said on this channel, Britain is the world's third least racist country, and it achieved that by being a majority white country. The real centers of racism you will find in Africa, in Asia, in India, and so forth. And the idea, of course, that the people who've come here in recent years don't hold racist views and racist beliefs is clearly for the birds. They do. And we're already seeing the effects of this because there's a huge population increase in southwest England, in Cornwall and Devon, but it's not due to mass immigration from outside. It's due to white flight from within the country. People fleeing the cities, freeing London and going to these places. So the nation is already self-segregating, which is very, very worrying for the future. Yeah. And just think how the population of this country has changed. So in 2001, Britain was 87.5% white British. At the last poll, it was 74% white British. And I can't think of another case, certainly in the developed world, or probably globally in the world, where the indigenous population of a country has decreased by 13% within the space of just 13 years. And so the question you have to ask then is, well, what is the solution to all of this? Is it an absolute moratorium on all immigration, as many of us would like to see, at least give us some breathing space? Well, again, Professor Coleman looked into this in 2010, and he basically offered three examples of three alternative options that governments have. One, if you get immigration down to, say, 80,000 a year, then white British will become a minority by the 2080s. If you do what the Reform Party want to do and have net zero immigration, so one in, one out, then white British will become a minority at the end of the century. But if you have a complete halt of moratorium on immigration, that's zero people coming in there till the end of the century, white British will remain a minority at about the current level of about 70% or so. Mind you, these are 2010 figures, which are much lower than now. Whichever way you're looking at it, I don't think it's realistic to have no immigration till the end of the century. But it seems inevitable that the white British will now become a minority at some point.
And other factors play into it as well, don't we? We need to push this idea of family and reproduction and actually, reverse that trend. One of the things I was thinking about there, well, you were talking about the 2010s and the end of the 20th century there, is that we were a much happier society as well. That's really important. All of the Gallup polls and all of the research, the academic research showed that people didn't think we were a racist society. People from ethnic minorities, as they were then, didn't think we were a racist society because we weren't, and we aren't now. Well, certainly the traditional white aspect of this country isn't racist, I would say. But people were happier. Now people are angrier. People dislike each other for various reasons. It's not just about the balkanization. Social media really plays into that as well. So we have a very dangerous situation here. And identity politics has absolutely fueled that. And I come back to the institutions, I come back to education, I come back to all the media, all of those things. They are fanning the flames, and they are doing so quite literally because they cannot move away from their ideology. Okay, they are absolutely ideologically focused. They are married to mass immigration, all of these people. They will never change. They will never change their mind, because if they do change their mind, they will admit that their whole worldview is upside down, and everything they've done to the country, all of those people network together. It's been absolutely catastrophic. And they will have to answer for it as well if they change that.
And what was concerning about this research also, alongside all of that, is that it showed that obviously the Muslim population was growing. And I think it estimated that by the end of the century, 1 in 5 people will be Muslim. And Matt Goodwin, even for us to say when it comes to young people, it could be even as high as 1 in 3 people will be Muslim. So if you're having a family now and you're white British and you're starting a family, your children could be being raised in a majority Muslim country.
And we know what the attitudes are and the trends of the attitudes, especially from young Muslims, because research groups like Policy Exchange, for example, have done lots of work on this. They want to outlaw homosexuality. They don't want equal rights for women. All of those things, all of the things which are sacred to the left, are absolutely going to go by the wayside. And I can't help but thinking about Iran in 1979 and 1980.
It's terrifying, isn't it? I mean, we're all sort of aware of this, but when this research comes through, it just puts it right in front of your face a bit more. I mean, I've almost been thinking, I wonder if we'll be still, like, the English language will be the main language spoken in this country. That this is The Guardian actually spoke about this a couple of years ago. They wrote about it, and they said that never before in history has an indigenous population change allowed itself to change in such a way voluntarily. It's usually by war or famine, but actually we've done it to ourselves.
I mean, you've just got to look at South Africa is probably going to be the model, where it's
in South Africa,
extreme segregation, gated communities, and we'll have to pay for our own security. The problem there is if you are poor, then
as I understand it, South Africa have over 70 laws that are all around race. Like, it's hyper-racialised.
Well, and that's, of course, is why we're having attacks on free speech and so forth. It's only by silencing people, it's only by undermining our own traditional customs and traditions, say, of free speech and so forth, that we can keep the multiculturalism bandwagon on the road by silencing truth tellers. But what you were saying, Philip's, actually is very good and profound about the involvement of our institutions and of schools and universities and all this. And people need to understand also that we have this red-green alliance. We've got this alliance between the far left and radical Islam, both of whom are utopian ideologies. One wants to create a communist utopia, one wants to create an Islamic utopia. You can only create those by a reign of terror and by suppressing and being authoritarian. And that's what they have in common. That's what attracts them to each other. And there's been the deliberate policy of the left in the West to use minorities as the foot soldiers to foment discord and revolution. It was when, after the Russian Revolution, they felt failed by the working classes in the West, who they found out were small c conservatives, traditionalists, patriots, the same sort of people who voted for Trump, the same sort of blue-collar workers, same people who are in the Red Wall. They were supposed to be the ones waving the red flags. So there was a concerted effort made over the course of the 20th century to turn minorities into those new activists. And so you have radical feminism. That was, these were all fundamentally Marxist, right? So you had normally the bourgeoisie and the proletariat in terms of attack on capitalism, but then with radical feminism, that was an attack on masculinity and on men. And masculinity, of course, is what defines Western civilization. Then you got critical race theory, which was an attack on whiteness. Queer theory, gender ideology, that again was an attack on the nuclear family, and then post-colonial theory, which is an attack on our Western heritage, achievements and attributes. And when you link all those with intersectionality, and those are all Marxist, all of those different forms of oppressed Marxist things.
They are the spine of the new curriculum as well.
That's what I mean. So that's precisely what's happened. And we've got a Marxist education system, and people who are promoting all of this are not Marxists, they're liberals, but they don't realize that actually what they've had foisted upon them is decades of the long march through the institutions, and ideas that were radical in the 1960s and 70s when they were first thought of and nobody heard of them have now been mainstreamed by the Be Kind Brigade, who don't realize that the intention of all of this is to overthrow the West. And of course, they seem to be far along the path.
And of course, they've got no idea about history. I mean, they killed and mutilated and scapegoated the kulaks in Russia. And what happened? They couldn't eat because no one could do any of the work. They weren't skilled enough to actually produce things. And that's absolutely what's going to happen here, because people are just going to go. If this place becomes unsafe, if it becomes unsafe for your children and your grandchildren, you are going to leave.
Well, we're certainly getting signs of what this coalition between Islam and the left will look like more and more. And one case recently of this is a progressive judge finding a man guilty of burning the Koran, which people are saying is essentially a Sharia law or blasphemy law, Philip. Yeah, I mean, you could talk us through this.
Well, this most people know about this story because it's been around for quite a long time. He's been found guilty now, this fellow, and I think he's been fined about £240, something like that. So it's a slap on the wrist, but he's been found guilty, and it is essentially a blasphemy law now, which is he was found guilty of racially aggravated. It was a racially aggravated public order offence. So it's the Public Order Act that is acting as a kind of proxy blasphemy law. But this guy is great, actually, because he's decided, he's come back and said, well, he's going to go on tour. He's going to go on tour burning Korans in all of the major cities of the country. And I think that's the way to respond to this kind of thing. It's to be belligerent. It's a very dangerous way, actually. And the guy is obviously putting himself at huge amounts of risk, but he's incredibly brave. And in our own ways, we all have to be brave to stand up against this. Nick Timothy in Parliament actually is pushing for a freedom of speech law to push back specifically against religion, because this was framed as a religion. This was framed as a hate incident against an ethnic minority and a religious minority. No, Islam is an ideology and a religion. It isn't an ethnicity, as we know. So it isn't that. So this is sophistry. Okay, this is legal wrangling because the judiciary is captured. So this fella is doing such a great job of pushing back. We all need to push back. And I'd temper this by saying I don't, agree with burning books in public at all. But I'm absolutely for free speech. And this is not about incitement. This is not about race. This is about pushing back on a poisonous fascist ideology, and good for him.
What was fascinating about this case was that the justification that the judge gave for evidence that he had caused disorder was that he burned the Quran and then people came up to him and stabbed him.
And attacked him.
And that was evidence.
Grotesque.
That was evidence that he had caused disorder, which shows you kind of that violence pays. Because if someone was burning a Bible or burning the Book of Mormon, what's the likelihood that they would be stabbed for doing that? We know that Islam causes this violent reaction in people in the way that we don't see with other religions. So essentially the judge is saying that, he's backing a kind of the violent kind of intimidation, isn't he?
I mean, the moment we put Islam beyond criticality, the moment we are barred from critiquing it in any way, shape or form, and my God, we're very close to that at the moment, we're finished. We literally are finished, because history tells us that. I talked about Iran just before. It really does tell us that.
And you're right, what they're doing is victim blaming. It's the same thing as blaming a woman for wearing a skirt that's too short and getting raped, essentially. And what does that mean if a woman in a miniskirt walks through a Muslim area and ends up inflaming the passions of the Muslims there? God knows what will happen. That's the logic, if you continue from what this person has done by burning a book. You could argue that both are equally outrageous to Muslim sensibilities. And what is particularly egregious here is also the fact that the CPS initially charged this man with causing alarm and distress to the religious institution of Islam.
Yes, exactly.
Now, that's complete nonsense in English law, because you can't alarm and distress a global
You can only
religion.
alarm a person.
You can only alarm, and the CPS are not just recently graduates of a law degree. You know, these are supposed to be the finest lawyers in the country. If they are coming out with such clearly politicized activist charges, which even the judge himself had to admit was actually the wrong charge, and they couldn't be charged under that. But that is clear activism at play here. And I think we need to understand that, you know, obviously, as people, the viewers know, but everyone needs to realize that the law is no longer on our side. I mean, they're quite clearly here to punish and persecute and to elevate only one group in terms of a blasphemy law. So it is only Islam that would be protected here. Now, as you said, they're using public order acts as proxy blasphemy laws, but of course we still have coming down the road this Islamophobia law, which will of course make it even more perilous for us to even probably have the conversations that we're used to having, because if it does essentially outlaw any criticism of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness, that means we wouldn't be able to have the discussion that we're currently having. We wouldn't be able to discuss child marriage, cousin marriage, maybe not even the rape gangs. I mean, and this is, you know, potentially coming down the line within months.
And it's ironic, isn't it, that they put race at the centre of this, because the judiciary absolutely racialises everybody. There's a terrible story that I don't know if viewers are aware of a man who was burned alive, immolated in his own house by feral youths, a feral black youth, threw a firework into his house. And his house was boarded up, his front garden was smashed to pieces, because it had been a continued campaign of harassment against him by these kids for years and years and years. So the kid that killed him got 6 years, just 6 years for this guy was 76 years old, right, and obviously vulnerable. You compare that to Lucy Connolly, who sent a tweet and got 31 months. It's about black and white. That's absolutely what it's about. It's about a protected characteristics and a conservative woman. So the law is working against us.
And of course, when you get these sorts of judgments being made, it legitimizes and reinforces those who think intolerance like this is legitimate, right? And that's the problem, of course. The violent criminals actually become legitimized in the eyes of their followers and others, who then say, well, I should also take up this sort of course. And, you know, we must be defending something like freedom of speech, which has taken centuries to develop. You know, it took hundreds of years and hard struggle, and blood, tears and toil were shed. And we are just so willingly doing away with it. And once it's gone, you don't get it back. And you don't have it in other cultures because, of course, we are so unique in the West. It's one of the things we should cherish about our society. You just have to look to places like Pakistan, where these things don't actually go to trial because the person will be lynched and burnt alive on the street before it gets to trial. And I'm afraid to say that these sorts of justifications by the courts means that you will get vigilantes and others now taking it upon themselves to become ever more dramatic.
It's why the common law works for us in this country.
Yeah, I mean, the great irony of this case was this was a Turkish man who was imprisoned in his country for speaking out against the political regime, then sought asylum in this country, assuming it was a place of freedom where he could speak out against Islam.
And pan into the fire.
Yeah, and he comes in and he's persecuted further. So it's almost like we are just as bad as other countries.
And it is ex-Muslims, of course, who are the ones who understand this better than anyone, and of course are more passionate. But you can't lob an accusation of racism against an ex-Muslim, can you? Which is what a lot of people like to try to do. And you look at what happened to Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She sought refuge in the Netherlands, even became a Dutch member of parliament, and had her Dutch citizenship revoked because there was a fear that she would inflame tensions with the Muslim community. Went to America. One of the reasons this chap burnt the Koran was in sympathy with the chap who had gone to Sweden and was murdered, shot to death in Sweden for burning the Koran too. And as he quite rightly said, if I stood outside Westminster Abbey and burnt a Bible, nobody would have batted an eyelid.
I think, increasingly people are becoming aware of this problem. And it's obviously what prompted Sarah Pochin, Reform MP, recently become an MP for Reform, to ask Keir Starmer in Parliament whether the burqa should be banned. I think, and people are all kind of looking to reform for hope on this issue because we don't know where else to turn to. And people were kind of picking up things like the burqa and saying, you know, should we ban this or should we ban that? People were talking about halal meat as well, because there's just a general sense that the culture is changing. And where do we, you know, what do we focus on first? What do people make of this question about banning the burqa? Other countries have done it. Is it just superficial? Is it not really dealing with the broader problem? Or should we start off with kind of detailed things like banning specific things? Is that the way to go? What do you think?
I think it's absolutely essential. I think the French have the correct attitude on all of this. They've banned it there. But when she raises, when this new Reform MP raised this as her very first question in Parliament, having just recently been elected, the gasps of astonishment and shock from others, you know, and you could see as if she had gone beyond the pale. I'm sorry, what do you think? Greece, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, 12 countries within Europe, many other countries in Africa and elsewhere and in Asia have banned the burqa. So don't act as if this is somehow some far-right radical thing when you've got democratic governments around Europe also enforcing it. Look, we're at a point now where we're at, I would say, existential crisis when it comes to social cohesion in this country. Everybody has to essentially understand that we cannot prioritize and promote minority cultures, particularly oppressive cultures like this sort of thing that we see where women are being oppressed. Even women who wear it thinking that they are choosing it to do so aren't free to choose so because they're born into a misogynistic culture. And these are the same women who are also sending their daughters off to have female genital mutilation, for heaven's sake. We need an aggressive, robust promotion of Western values and Western traditions. And I think viewers at home need to understand that the burqa is actually the full face covering. A lot of people think it's the hijab with the face showing. That's the hijab. The niqab is the veil, the burqa is the full thing. We must always be able to show our faces. That's how you engage with other people. You know, it's the most basic form of human interaction is reading people's faces. And I don't want someone to going into a shop or having, a passport photograph or whatever taken. Even I think somebody wanted their mugshot taken wearing a burqa, where that sort of ridiculous level, we have to assert. And then actually, I would like all face coverings banned because now, of course, there are so many muggers and street robbers and people with machetes and on scooters stealing wallets who now have these balaclava masks on. They should be banned as well.
It's a safety concern.
It's all about cultural practices, isn't it? And the burqa is a cultural practice that is essentially alien to this country, alien to this continent. It was only a few months ago that they were debating cousin marriage in Parliament. So this is absolutely pressing. I think you both made all of the key points there. The points that I would add to that is that I was just very disappointed with the ongoing reaction from Reform, from the chairman, who said, well, this is not policy. And then Lee Anderson said, oh, I agree. So it was chaotic. OK, I think the chairman, who's unelected, should absolutely stand by a new MP who is absolutely speaking for the people and is saying something central to what, and it's, the details are by the side for the moment. It's saying something central to what reform is all about, actually. It worries me massively that they are nowhere near bashing out policy about this kind of stuff. This is the kind of detail, isn't it, that they really need to be on top of. And they mustn't be arguing amongst them. It's more of that, isn't it? They mustn't be arguing amongst themselves in public, because I know damn well what their voters think and what their voters want and how their voters react to the burqa. So it's this idea of understanding it's policy and again, it's governance. It's how they handle themselves in public, how they organise themselves as a party. They really need to get on to that, because for me, yes, the Parliament are going to have these performative oohs and ahs and sharp intakes of breath and all of that kind of thing. Of course they are. But for me, it's how Reform handle themselves, and they've really let themselves down.
I think it should be clarified that Nigel Farage and Richard Tice and Lee Anderson have all supported her.
Yes.
And then Farage said it makes total sense to have this discussion. Lee Anderson has said he's opposed opposed to the burqa as well. And Richard Tice has also come on side. It's only been one person, the chairman, who's actually called this dumb. And I think that reflects a broader issue. And how many more of those tensions will there be? Will there be somewhere that this obvious fissure?
Yeah.
Because it's going to persist for a long time to come, I would say.
Yes, absolutely, Rafe. I agree completely, but I think the point still stands that they don't have policy. They've not thought through this in a detailed and meaningful way. So they have one outlier who's saying all of this kind of stuff because he possibly doesn't know what's going on, or he doesn't agree with the general conversation, and that isn't nailed down in policy. But we've just heard something about the chairman, haven't we?
Yeah, we should say, I mean, we're filming this on a Thursday. We've just heard from our producer that Zia Youssef has resigned from the Reform Party. I mean, I was just about to say I'm becoming increasingly concerned with him and his influence. I didn't like the way he called Sarah Pochin dumb. And it wasn't dumb to raise this issue because, as you said, it revealed something about Parliament, all the gasps and the oohs and the ahs. It doesn't matter whether it's policy. I think it should be policy. But even if it's not, the question stimulates conversation. And I think he was totally out of order to call her up on it when she's an MP and he isn't. But he has resigned. So that is a big shift for Reform Party, isn't it? Because a lot of people on the right have been concerned with them having a Muslim chairman who seems to be going about things in quite a bullish way, seems to be causing a lot of chaos and havoc behind the scenes, particularly with Rupert Lowe. So this is good news, do we think?
I think this is very good news.
Yeah.
I think if you are calling your MPs dumb, you have to go. If you don't know what the MPs are thinking, you have to go. Or if you do know what they're thinking and you fundamentally disagree with them, which is probably nearer to the point, you have to go. And if you are miles away from your voter base, then you do have to go. This may be very, very good news for Reform. They might go forward in leaps and bounds.
And they might make banning the burqa their policy, but perhaps. Who knows?
Well, given that all the MPs seem to be on side with the issue, they're very much so. We've literally had this within the last few seconds, as we say. And obviously that was a huge issue for many voters in making them doubt whether they could. The core base of Reform had issues because they did see a watering down of Reform's policies on things like immigration, mass deportation and so forth shortly after he arrived on the scene. And so whether there was a direct connection or not, we don't have the evidence for it, but many people certainly made the connection that many of the reasons that people wanted to vote Reform were being watered down. We have seen Reform going back to the right in recent weeks, which has been very encouraging. But I would imagine after this decision now, we will see a further rightward shift with Reform, particularly, of course, now, if we have to say, you've got the Labour Party and the Tory Party after the local elections trying to outflank Reform anyway and become more right-wing on things like leaving the ECHR and other policy issues that we had in recent days. And so actually this could be a good time for Reform to take a re-evaluation of its policy agenda.
Yes, and it's where they go from here, essentially, as you say, because at the moment there is clear water between Reform and the Labour Party, and the Tory Party are just nowhere. So they're in an incredibly strong position. So it's very good. What I don't want them to do is grab defeat from the jaws of victory, which, they may well do.
Well, I'm sure this news of Zia Youssef resigning will be welcome news for Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib. But obviously it was Zia Youssef who called the police on Rupert Lowe and things got, really out of hand. So it's a vindication for them in a way. But anyway, that's all for Newspeak this week. Thank you, Rafe. Thank you, Philip. If you're a member, we are going on to our extra content for members to talk about the royal family, actually, while everything's going to hell in a handbasket. They are doing, former members of the royal family, Prince Harry and Meghan, are doing what looks like TikTok dances before pregnancy. So we're going to be talking a bit about that. But if not, see you next week.
Our mission at the New Culture Forum is and always has been to defend and celebrate Britain's history, culture and its people, and indeed Western civilization, at a time when both are under sustained attack. We have grown from small beginnings to become the country's most influential right-leaning cultural think tank. Our content is watched and read by some of Britain's most influential political figures. But now, we need your help. If you believe in what we do, then please do become a member. For as little as £4 a month, you can make a vital contribution to what we do. As a member of the NCF family, you will help ensure that we can continue to produce quality content online, such as our 3 weekly programs, Whittle, which is our flagship interview show, Newspeak, our panel discussion show, and Deprogrammed, which is targeted at Britain's youth. As you probably know, in addition, we produce important documentaries, such as our critically acclaimed 6-part series, The West, a stunning celebration of the history and genius of Western civilization, and our ongoing documentary series, Heresies, with hard-hitting episodes tackling subjects such as immigration, gender ideology, and BBC bias. But the New Culture Forum is much more than a YouTube channel. We don't just complain about Britain as it is, we provide real solutions and clear policies on how we can push back against the madness and restore sanity to this nation. Our presenters are now highly sought after and have become familiar faces across the media. Our prestigious annual Smith Lecture and our regional and indeed national conferences have attracted world-class speakers. Perhaps most importantly, we are the only organisation on the right of politics that has launched a national movement without actually being a political party. And uniquely, through our NCF Locals programme, we've established some 30 active branches in towns and cities right across the nation, from Edinburgh to Exeter, and with many more on the way. We're very proud of what we've achieved, and our members have made it possible. In return, our members receive access to exclusive content, invitations to private events, free or discounted tickets to our conferences and lectures, free copies of our books, and much more. I very much hope that you'll join us too by clicking the link in the description or going to our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Now is the time that we need your help. Thank you.